Good morning, everyone. To those of you in North America, my name is Jess Swart. I'm going live today to take some questions and go through our Tip Tuesday. So, welcome. I'm just going to make sure everything is all set up here and make sure I can see my questions. And then I will introduce myself. Awesome. So, my name is Jess Swart. As I mentioned before, I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and I also have studied disabilities, and I'm an early childhood educator. So I've been working in the field of autism and behavior for over 25 years, and I have a face-to-face service business here in Canada where I live these days, and I am also providing a range of online remote services, some online courses that you can take at your own pace, as well as paired with some live coaching and accountability, because these courses, you can access so many different courses these days. You can jump onto AI and get answers for almost anything. But the tricky part is having something really individualized for your child and being able to have that back and forth conversation with someone to really get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on. Behavior can be simple at the very basic understanding of it, but it can become very complex very quickly, especially for our children with autism or children who are neurodiverse, because there's multiple factors contributing to their behavior sometimes, and we want to make sure we're responding in a compassionate way. We want to make sure that we're trauma informed, that we're not just jumping in with a strategy without really understanding the foundation and the underlying reasons for that behavior. So I won't delve into that too much. I have a few questions today I wanted to focus on and respond to. So let's have a look here. I had a question around anxiety, and so I thought that would be a really great place to start. I want to give a shout out to Caroline Bazenko. Hopefully I'm saying her name right. She is a fantastic psychologist based here in Canada. She has a great podcast. In fact, I think she has a couple podcasts. One is really focused on anxiety, and she's a specialist within the field of anxiety and neurodiversity. So she is a wonderful resource. I recommend going to listen to her podcast. It is, I think, called Overpowering Emotions. I will add a link to that once I've finished my live so that you can access that. But she talks about anxiety from a range of perspectives, and she does explain the fact that working on supporting our children through anxiety as opposed to teaching them to try to get rid of it. And anxiety really is a part of our life. Anxiety, we need to remember, is a beneficial element of our human experience. Back in the caveman days and even now, anxiety helps to protect us. It helps to protect us from real life dangers. But what has happened and can happen is that we get conditioned to respond in an anxious way to things that aren't actually dangerous anymore to us. So it's kind of trying to reprogram ourselves. This could be a result of how our brain is working. It can also be a result of our environment. Could be a result of certain experiences we've had in the past, which then condition us to have this really anxious reaction to something. Or it's a cognitive thing, right? We might not be having that experience, but in our brain, we're convincing ourselves and we're maybe catastrophizing something that leads to that anxious response. And our children are the same. So you might be experiencing anxiety yourself, and we want to think about how do we support our children to not get conditioned to the wrong type of anxiety. So remember that it's not about getting rid of anxiety totally. It's about learning how to cope with it, work through it, and I guess rationalize it as to whether it's really something to be anxious about and to react to. Or is it something that is just not really that big of a deal and we can get through it? Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. If you are jumping online and seeing this, please feel free to write a question in the comments, and I should be able to see that live and I will respond to that. If you're watching the replay, feel free to send me a message, a DM through Facebook, and you can also reach out to me through my email, which is jess@jswartbehavior.com. You should be able to see my email in my bio for my Facebook page, which is Jess Swart Behavior, without the U. I'm originally from Australia, but I've written things in the US way so that it makes it easy for you guys to find and understand things. Those of you in Canada and Australia, we can deal with removing that U from behavior. All right, let me jump into this question here. I have a few questions here about behavior. All right. So some parents have asked in the past, is the behavior that I'm seeing, is it anxiety, is it because of autism, or is it just behavior in general, right? So this can be really hard to answer as to cover everyone, but I'm going to give a bit of an example so that you can help to understand when you see your child's behavior, if it is anxiety related or if it's something else. Okay. So, this can be tricky. Sometimes sometimes the behavior might look like anxiety. Sometimes anxiety presents as a challenging behavior or an escalation. And what we want to do is really, it comes back to understanding what's happening, to be a detective, to look at what's happening in the environment before you notice the behavior of concern. So then you can see if it's really your child wanting to get something or escape from something, get some sensory stimulation or avoid sensory stimulation, get control over a situation. So looking at if it's one of those, what we call functions of a behavior or reasons for a behavior, or if it is a real anxiety response that they are getting themselves worked up because they're worried about something, they're worried about the outcome. And sometimes there is a link. If our children are hypersensitive to sound and they know you're about to go to a party and they start to escalate and get really worried and stressed about this event happening, that could be linked to the fact that they find it really overwhelming when it comes to the noise that's presented in that environment. Or it could be the busyness, right? They're becoming anxious about, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in this environment with all these children, it's going to be really busy, I'm going to have to share, I'm going to have to do this, right? So they're working themselves up because of an experience that is difficult for them. So in that way, what do we do? Okay, so how do we support our children through this? Now, the important thing is that we acknowledge their anxiety. We go, yeah, it's going to be tough, hey? It is tough to like deal with that noise. Oh, it is tough to deal with people around you all the time. And if your child is nonverbal and has a limited expressive or receptive language capacity, you're going to still acknowledge, but you're going to reduce the language you use. We want to presume also competence. So we want to presume that our children are understanding us, even if their expressive language is limited. So I might say, oh, it's tricky. Yeah, it's tricky. Oh, I might feel worried. I feel worried. Yeah. Or you could use kind of first then language. So it might be first I go to the party, then I feel worried. Or first I go to the party, then I don't like people around me. So it kind of just depends on your child, their understanding, how much language you use. But we want to acknowledge, yeah, it's going to be tough. Ah, that's rough. That's tricky. I don't like that either. It's hard. And then we want to make a statement that is positive and encouraging. So it's modeling a statement that indicates I can do this and I can get through it, right? Oh, that's going to be tough, but we can get through it. And maybe it's maybe you're there supporting your child through this. We want to be compassionate and not just chuck our children into the deep end and be like, off you go, good luck, I hope you can swim, right? When they don't have any of the skills. We can't expect that our kids can cope with these situations when they don't have the skills yet. So there's a balance. We're not going to just remove our kid from that environment because we need to support them to learn. So we're going to look at how can we build their capacity as opposed to fully removing that stimulus or that environment that triggers anxiety. Because if we do that, we're reinforcing this this behavior of, or this pattern of, I get escalated and then that potential difficult situation is removed. Okay, so we want to find a balance. It's kind of like a teeter-totter, right? We've got to figure out where that balance point is, that it pushes us a little bit but doesn't tip us over the edge and throw us right off, because that's when our brain goes offline, right? We're not processing information in our prefrontal cortex anymore. We're very much offline. We're in our emotional brain and we're just kind of reacting really intensively and we're not learning. So there is always that balance. Okay, so we're going to acknowledge, we're going to make a statement that is positive, that is with the mindset that we can get through this, we can do it, I can have courage, I can get through this tricky thing, and supporting our kids through that. Maybe even saying we can help them through it, right? We can get through it. We want to not judge our children for this. We want to avoid language like, it's all going to be okay, it's not a big deal, what's the problem, stop overreacting, because this is kind of downplaying the emotions that they might be feeling. For sure, they might be feeling emotions that are bigger than what we might consider as realistic for the situation, but we want to acknowledge those, right? And over time, if we're working on getting through this anxiety and building their capacity, then they will also notice, and we will notice that they're gaining the skills to get through these difficult situations. All right, so we are then going to think about what we can do to make a plan to get through this difficult situation. If your child hasn't tipped over the edge yet, we're going to make a plan. We're going to figure out, okay, what are the steps that we can take to work through the anxiety, to work through the situation. I really like to use the phrase, it's not going to last forever. We can get through this, it won't last forever. Everything changes. So, any bad situation, any negative situation doesn't last. Same as any good situation, right? We are changing, our world is changing, our environment is changing. Our situations are changing all the time. So if we can teach our children that everything changes, nothing is always the same, that impermanence, then they can have that courage to work through these difficult emotions, to work through these difficult, challenging situations, and know that being a little bit out of control is okay and I can manage that. Right, we want to look at the situation and breaking it down to try to make it achievable. I talk a lot about breaking skills down in my trainings, in my workshops and presentations, and in the books that I have. I have an ebook that's called the Calm the Chaos Toolkit, and I talk about how to break a skill down in that. In my mini course, I really go into detail, giving some examples of how to break a skill down and how to teach it and work through the steps. So I want you to think about, what are the situations that trigger your child's anxiety, and how can we break it down? And we do what we call graduated exposure. So this is not just putting a spider on a child's hand and telling them to just deal with it, okay, too much. It's about taking small graduated steps and helping our children to work through the anxiety, get to a regulated spot, and be able to do that consistently before we move to the next level. So one example that might sound a little strange, but there's all types of anxieties that people experience. One individual I worked with had an anxiety around babies. Okay, now this we realized came from the experience she had had with babies in the past, where they would scream and cry, and she was very hypersensitive to sound, and so that screeching, high pitch, really like ongoing sound was a real trigger for her anxiety. So whenever she saw a baby, she would escalate, right? She would run away, she would scream, she would even try and push the baby, so she would engage in some aggression, which was really difficult for family, right? Imagine going out to the park and having to try to avoid any babies, and it got to a point where even if the baby wasn't crying, the child would go over and try to push a pram over, or a stroller, or try to push a child over or push them away. And let's first start with understanding. I often go through in my courses, let's understand this, because it's not that the child is intentionally trying to be mean or aggressive just for the sake of being aggressive. It's because of this negative association and this anxiety that they might be feeling, and to escape that anxiety and to deal with the situation, to remove this aversive stimulus, pushing or acting in a way that people leave you or move away is really effective. Okay, so let's have that really objective view when we're looking at behaviors. So what did we do? Well, we started off at thinking, how do we break this down? Because I can't just expose this girl to a baby when she's going to go out and immediately become aggressive. right? That's not safe for the baby. It's not helping this child learn the skills when she just goes from 0 to 100. So we need to break it down. So we started off with photos of babies, okay? So we would practice, and we had some visuals as well there. We had a visual of, I look like eyes, I look at the picture, I take some deep breaths, I do some squeeze and relax, right? We've got some physical physical calming techniques, and this is not just about getting rid of the anxiety, but it's about practicing some techniques to help us work through that anxiety. And then some counting. So this child loved counting, so I like to try to use, for regulation strategies, I like to try and use the child's preference, something that they like, something that is entertaining to them. Sometimes I use concepts like, oh, let's put that on a rocket ship and blast it to the moon, right? We imagine this imagery of putting something on a rocket, or we imagine putting it on a unicorn and it's flying away over the rainbow. So something that is kind of aversive or this negative feeling, we can put it on something and send it away and move it on. Okay, but it's going to come back, and that's okay. But we can continue to move it on, and we can continue to remind ourselves that it's not going to last forever. So we might also use some phrases. I can get through this, right? It's not going to last forever. So we would start, this first level was looking at a picture, and we would look at a picture of a baby for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. We would have it on the table while doing other activities. We would have pictures of babies throughout the house, just to work on that desensitization. And for this girl, looking at a baby wasn't like it didn't heighten her anxiety to number 10, right? It was kind of like a 1 or a 2 on the scale of anxiety, and so she wasn't overstimulated when these images were put around the house, which was really good. So we knew we could do that, and we worked on that for about a week. And then we went to the next level. So the next level was watching a YouTube video of a baby, and watching a video of the baby quiet, right? So not crying, just to build that positive association that it doesn't always have to be a triggering situation. So we worked on watching a baby not crying on YouTube, and when this girl could watch the video a number of times, let's say 5 times across a couple days, I got parents to work on this, and the aides that were working with this girl, once she could cope with that and stay regulated or work through a lower level of anxiety, we would move to the next level. So we want to make sure that our children have that capacity and to work through the anxiety before we move up the next level. And just, I want to make a point here and mention that I know it can be hard to prevent the exposure in all other situations. So there were some times when parents would go out, they'd see a baby, and they'd have to be reactive. They'd have to, respond in a bit more of a reactive way to redirect their daughter when they saw a baby. So they would still be proactive in that if they saw a baby ahead, they might take another path, or they might bring headphones. So this child was used to putting headphones on, so that was another tool for her to reduce that reactiveness when she would see a baby. Anyway, back to the scales. So we have watching a YouTube video without the baby crying, and then watching a YouTube video with the baby crying, right? And we'd work through that, and we'd watch it for, if the girl had a really heightened reaction the very first time the video played, we would only play it for a few seconds, right? Literally like 3 to 5 seconds of a video. And as she could work through that and cope with it, we increased it to 10, and then 30 seconds, and then a minute, right? So, and then various videos that weren't just babies crying, but it was like a video of a parent holding the baby and the baby crying and the parent comforting the baby, and this process that you might be exposed to when there's a baby out in the community or when someone comes home with their baby. Okay, so we got to that point. We worked on some different strategies. We worked through this moderate level of anxiety and behavior. So just keep in mind that when we're working on these skills, it's not that there's no behavior and it's not that there's no anxiety, because we want to train our brain to be exposed to that anxiety and our emotions, right? To feel that anxiety and then get through it and come out the other side. So another important thing is that when your child does get through an anxious moment and kind of come out the other side, I want you to keep in mind that this is an opportunity to praise them, to remind them what just happened. You can make statements like, wow, that's great. Can you see that it's all good now? You just got through that tough time. That was great. What courage you have and persistence, and you can get through this. Do you see that you were able to get through it? It didn't last forever. It stopped now. Amazing, right? So we want to praise our children for getting through those hard times. And if your child is particularly anxious, I want you to pay more attention to that and praise them for getting through things that they maybe used to be tough for them but aren't really anymore. But increase that praise and positive response when they do things that are usually trickier for them. So we want to increase the positive, even for situations that seem really easy to them, right? So just increase that praise. All right, so we went through that level, and then we had a very controlled environment where we would have a real life baby coming into the home. So we worked on, the friends of a parent who would come in, and it would be short exposures. They would come in with the baby when the baby is calm and quiet, maybe sleeping, and then leave. And then come in and then leave the room, and come in and leave the room. And the child was praised and reinforced for staying calm and coping and controlled. And then we would come in with the baby, and then the baby would leave, and we'd play crying sounds of the baby in another room, right? And we'd work through that part of that level of the exposure steps. So you can see that there's lots of steps here, and it really is individualized depending on the child and how well they're progressing. So we worked on kind of the child being there and the sounds in another room, and then we slowly worked on them being closer to the individual and closer paired with the child a bit more. So the child crying a little bit, and the client or the girl that I'm working with being in the same room, and then also teaching her to, as opposed to responding with aggression, to remove herself, right? So giving some guidance, and as soon as the child would cry, we would give her headphones with some music playing in there that was preferred music, and then guide her to her room or guide her to walk away. So we wanted to help her have some coping strategies, right? So it's a mixture of working through that negative stimulus that she doesn't like and kind of coping with that, but also some tools that she can use that are very easy to access in multiple environments. It's pretty easy to have some headphones for the parents to take out with them, And then ultimately we got to a point where she could be sitting at the table with the parent and the child, and the playing with the child, right? So building that positive interaction as opposed to always being this negative aversive stimulus. And parents could go out. There were some times when we would have the headphones, sometimes when we wouldn't have the headphones, so that if there was a situation out in the community or at someone else's house where parents forgot the headphones and they couldn't rely on that, this child could cope with that situation. All right, that was a very detailed explanation, but it's a real life example of working through this anxiety response and behavioral response to a stimulus that isn't always able to be controlled or prevented, right? We can't always just escape from this. So moving on, this is one example, and I want to just mention, when we're talking about anxiety, it's often linked to control. So I want you to think about yourself. So if something happened to your home, think if your home was not able to be accessed all of a sudden for some reason, how would that make you feel? Would you start to feel anxious? Would you start to be a bit stressed, right? And this is linked to control. All of a sudden, you don't have control of your environment. Think about a flight, right? If you're going on a flight and your flight is cancelled and you don't have a place, you don't get your accommodation covered, you don't have a place to stay, you're not sure when the next flight, the flight company is not telling you when the next flight is. So some of us find that really anxiety provoking. And we as adults need to learn to train our brain to regulate itself, to coach our brain to not be so worried, and our body. And I have this too, right? We're all the same. We have our different levels for sure of control, but there are situations where I have to remind myself, I can get through this. It's not going to last forever, and there's nothing I can do about it. So what's the point in being stressed and worried, right? It's easier to say, but the more we practice, the more we can do it. There are times when I take deep breaths. A great technique that I encourage is to breathe in, hold your breath for a few seconds, and then let it out. So that holding and tensing our body and then releasing can be a really good way to help release that tension that builds up in our body when we experience anxiety. So it's a pairing of mindset, of what you're telling yourself, and physical tools to help that physical tension release and relax. But getting back to that control, so keep in mind, for our children on the autism spectrum or our neurodiverse kids, if they are feeling like they're out of control all the time, this can lead to anxiety. So they may be feeling some level of anxiety quite regularly throughout their day. And possibly because they're feeling out of control. So working on flexibility and not being in control and reinforcing that is a really important element to help build our children's capacity. And you can practice this in lots of different ways. I do go through this a lot in my Busting Behaviors protocol, which is my 12-module course. I have a specific module on teaching our children to increase their flexibility and their ability to tolerate changes in the environment. So there are lots of different ways that you can work on teaching your child to cope with changes and to let go of that control. On the flip side, one of the things you can do when anxiety is kind of triggered by a lack of control, you can give your child control in other ways. So I want you to think about how you can give your child choice and control throughout their day, throughout their environment, and maybe it's in lots of little ways. It's like specifically telling them, do you want these shoes or these shoes? Do you want your green jacket or your black jacket? Would you like to sit in this seat or this seat? Do you want to take this toy or this toy into the car? Do we want to play, I don't know, do we want to listen to the Wiggles or do we want to listen to Baby Shark? Baby Shark? Baby Shark. So giving those choices, and I think a this or a that choice is perfect. It's really easy. I want you to think about where you can embed these choices very naturally and consistently throughout the day and your environment. When our children have choice and control in other ways, it can help them then cope with situations where they don't have control, because they're not always trying to grab control everywhere because they already have some in other situations. All right, let me see if I want to share one more thing. I want to share with you a social story that I have that I want to go through with you. So let me just see. All right, give me 1 second. I'm not sure if I can share with you my screen. If I don't do it now, I'll add an image, or I'll add into the links this social story. And if you would like it, you can send me a DM, or you can make a comment about this. It's called I Can Do Hard Things. So you can comment hard things in the comment box and I'll send you a copy of it. I'm just trying to see if I can seem to see if I can share my screen anymore. Alright, we will maybe just leave it there. Alright, I will figure out how to do this next time. Thank you for your patience, but I will share a image of my social story, I Can Do Hard Things. It goes through, let me just see here. It goes through a story. I would say it's for a child who has a moderate to high level of language capacity. So it talks about when things are hard, I might feel frustrated, or when I'm tired, I might feel frustrated. and some examples of it is linked to school, so this is more about when my teacher is busy and can't help me, I can feel frustrated. When I get something wrong, when I work with other kids, I'm scared to make a mistake. When my classmates don't help me straight away and I need help, this makes me frustrated. Or when things are really tricky, right? So we want to acknowledge that these are situations where it's frustrating for our children. But we can practice persistence, and I talk about persistence to kids and what that means. It means trying and trying and trying again. And persistence makes our muscles and our brain stronger, right? And when we feel frustrated, what can we do? We can take a deep breath. We can say some phrases like, keep going, I can do it, I got this. So when something's really tricky, I want to try again, keep trying again. And it talks about the feeling we might experience. I might have this uncomfortable feeling inside me, but these uncomfortable feelings, they won't last forever. They will go away eventually. And I just need to stop and observe and wait for that feeling to go. Taking a deep breath or singing my favorite song can help me cope while this feeling goes. Or while I'm waiting for this feeling to go. What can I think? I can think this feeling won't last forever. So we talk about reinforcing this by saying, like, when I'm frustrated, it's an uncomfortable feeling, I can say I've got this. And this is about building resilience, and I can be proud of myself, right? I can be proud. So, and then the last page is a summary here that says, to build my resilience, I can practice persistence. And I make this fun. I say, let's go. We're going to be persistent or persistence. And we can stay calm, keep trying. It's uncomfortable, but it won't last forever. When I do hard things, my brain and muscles get stronger. Okay, so if you want this kind of little social story, send me a DM or comment in this live post. Do hard things or hard things. Anything like that will give me the cue to send you through this little social story that you can use with your child. Now, the key to social stories is that you go through them and you practice. Just reading through a story is not going to help a behavior without the practice, without the reinforcement. So you want to decide, okay, what's one hard thing we're going to do? Let's see if we can get through it. Let's work on persistence. Let's get through it. One quick example is having a container that has something that your child likes in it that they find really hard to open, right? So they have to use persistence. They have to keep trying. They have to work through that frustration. No, it won't last forever. And I can get through this, right? So working on something like that. And then if they can't do it, they try at least 3 times. And if they can't do it, they get your help. And then you can help them to open it. And then they get whatever is inside there. A little treat or a little toy that they like, or some slime or bubbles or something like that, right? So that's one way that you can work on persistence, you work on that resilience, you work on working through emotions that are uncomfortable. I'm going to leave it there for today. Remember, I am doing this every 2 weeks, so I'll see you in another 2 weeks for our Tip Tuesday and my Q&A. If you have a question, send me a DM through my Facebook page during the next couple weeks, and I will answer your question in the next Tip Tuesday Q&A session. That's all for now. Have a great 2 weeks, and I will see you soon. Bye.